안녕하세요, 유수연입니다. 지금 휴게소에서 책을 읽고 있어요. 들어보세요. It's chapter 4 of Room of Her Own, written by Virginia Woolf and read by Suhyun. This is my book here, Kindle. Here you go. Evidently, two of the four famous women here named here, not by nature novelists. Emily Bronte should have written poetic plays. The overflow of George Eliot's capacious mind should have spread itself with creative impulse, spent upon history or biography. They wrote novels, however, one may even go further. Is that taking pride and prejudice from the show and say that they wrote good novels without boasting or giving pain to the opposite sex. One may say that Pride and Prejudice is a good book. At any rate, one would not have been ashamed to have been caught in the act of writing Pride and Prejudice. Yet Jane Austen was glad that a hinge creaked so that she might hide her manuscript before anyone came in. To Jane Austen, there was something discreditable in writing Pride and Prejudice, and I wondered, would Pride and Prejudice have been a better novel if Jane Austen had not thought it necessary to hide her manuscript from visitors. I read a page or two to see, but I could not find any signs that her circumstances had harmed her work in the slightest. That perhaps was the chief miracle about it. Here was a woman about the year 1800, writing about hate, writing without hate, without bitterness, without fear, without protest, without preaching. That was how Shakespeare wrote, I thought, looking at Antony and Cleopatra. And when people compare Shakespeare and Jane Austen, they may mean that the minds of both have consumed or impediments. For that reason, we do not know Jane Austen and we do not know Shakespeare, and for that reason Jane Austen pervades every word that she wrote, and so does Shakespeare. If Jane Austen suffered in any way from her circumstances, it was in the narrowness of life that was imposed upon her. Yeah, I'm kind of just suffering in any way from my own circumstances. Yeah, excuse me. Just let me resume. Reading aloud. It was impossible for a woman to go about alone. She never traveled. She never drove through London in an omnibus or had luncheon in a shop by herself. But perhaps it was the nature of Jane Austen doesn't not want to what she had now. Her gift and her circumstances matched each other completely. But I doubt whether that was true of Charlotte Bronte. I said, opening Jane Eyre and laying it beside Pride and Prejudice. I opened it at chapter 12 and my eye was caught by the phrase, anybody may blame me who likes. What were they blaming Charlotte Bronte for? I wondered. And I read how Jane Eyre used to go up onto the roof when Mrs. Fairfax was making jellies and looked over the fields at a distant view. And then she longed, and it was for this that they blamed her. That then I longed for a power of vision which might overpass that limit, which might reach the busy world towns, regions full of life I had heard of but never seen. That then I desired more of practical experience than I possessed, more of intercourse with my kind, of acquaintance with variety of character than was here within my reach. I valued what was good in Mrs. Fairfax and what was good in Adele, but I believed in the existence of other and more vivid kinds of goodness, and what I believed in I wished to behold. Who blames me? Many, no doubt, and I shall be called discontented. I could not help it. The restlessness was in my nature. It agitated me to pain sometimes. It is vain to say human beings ought to be satisfied with tranquility. They must have action, and they make it if they cannot find it. Millions are condemned for a stiller doom than mine, and millions are in silent revolt against their lot. Somebody knows how many rebellions ferment in the masses of life which people earth. Women are supposed to be very calm generally, but women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties and a field for their efforts, as much as their brothers do. They suffer from too rigid a restraint to absolute stagnation, precisely as men would suffer, and it is narrow-minded in their more privileged fellow creatures to say that they ought to confine themselves to making puddings and knitting stockings, to playing on the piano and embroidering bags. It is thoughtless to condemn them or laugh at them if they seek to do more and learn more than custom has pronounced necessary for their sex. When thus alone, I not unfrequently heard Grace Poole's laugh. That is an awkward break, I thought. It is upsetting to come upon Grace Poole all of a sudden. The continuity is disturbed. One might say, I continued, laying the book down beside Pride and Prejudice, that the woman who wrote those pages had more genius in her than Jane Austen. But if one reads them over and marks that jerk in them, that indignation, one sees that she will never get her genius expressed whole and entire. Her books will be deformed and twisted. She will write in a rage where she should write calmly. She still write foolishly where she should write wisely. She will write of herself where she should write of her characters. She is at war with her lot. How could she help but die young, cramped and thwarted? One could not but play for a moment with the thought of what might have happened if Charlotte Bronte had possessed, say, 300 a year, but the foolish woman sold the copyright of her novels outright for £1,500, had somehow possessed more knowledge of the busy world and towns and regions full of life, more practical experience and intercourse with her kind, and acquaintance with a variety of character. In those words, she puts her finger exactly not only upon her own defects as a novelist, but upon those of her sex at that time. She knew, no one better, how enormously her genius would have profited it if it had not spent herself in solitary visions over distant fields. If experience and intercourse and travel had been granted her, but they were not granted, they were withheld. When we must accept the fact that all these good novels, Villette, Emma, Wuthering Heights, Middlemarch, were written by women without more experience of life than could enter the house of a respectable clergyman, written to in the common sitting room of that respectable house, and by women so poor that they could not afford to buy more than a few quires of paper at a time upon which to write Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre. One of them, it is true, George Eliot, escaped after much tribulation, but only to a secluded villa in St. John's Wood, and there she settled down in the shadow of the world's disapproval. I wish it to be understood, she wrote, that I should never invite anyone to come and see me who did not ask for the invitation. For was she not living in sin with a married man, and might not the sight of her damage the chastity of Mrs. Smith, or whoever it might be that chanced to call? One might submit to the social convention and be cut off from what is called the world. At the same time, on the other side of Europe, there was a young man living freely with this gypsy or with that great lady, going to the wars, picking up unhindered and uncensored all that varied experience of human life which served him so splendidly later when he came to write his books. Had Tolstoy lived at the Priory in seclusion with a married lady, cut off from what is called the world, however edifying the moral lesson, he could scarcely, I thought, have written War and Peace. But one could perhaps go to a little deeper into the question of novel writing and the effect of sex upon the novelist.